Hello, it's Tracy Kiernan, and this acrylic painting tutorial is going to show you how to paint Cornstalk Harvest with acrylics on an 11 by 14 inch canvas. Let's go over brushes and colors that we'll be needing for this painting. So for the background, I'm going to use this. This is actually technically a makeup foundation brush, but I occasionally like to use it, and it gives you that kind of soft background color. If you don't have that one or don't want to get it, it's fine. You can achieve this similar effect with the 3/4 flat. And the other two brushes that we'll be using are the number 4 round brush and the number 12 bright brush. So the bright brush is like a 1/2 inch flat, and the round brush is a kind of a smaller round brush. And let's go over colors. These are the Liquitex Basics colors: Titanium White, Cerulean Blue, Yellow Oxide, Cad Yellow Medium, Mars Black, Burnt Sienna. We'll also be using Ochre's Green Hue Permanent and Cad Orange Hue. And then we'll also be using Naples Yellow. So there's 3 different yellows in this: the Naples Yellow, the Cad Yellow Medium, and the Yellow Oxide. I suppose if you wanted to simplify it, you can probably just take out the Yellow Oxide and just use the 2 other yellows. And let's go ahead and get started. So let's start with our canvas in a vertical format. I'm working on 11 by 14, and I have Cerulean Blue and Titanium White on my paint palette, and I'm going to be using this little soft foundation brush. It's just going to give us a really pretty soft background. You can use the 3/4 flat if you don't have this, or if you don't like to use this brush, but sometimes I get tired of painting all my backgrounds with the big flat brush, so I'm going to grab this one and do it this way this time. So let's take our Cerulean Blue and add a little white to it. We're doing a basic sky, and I'm just loading the paint right there in the end of the bristles, and I'm painting in very light circular paint strokes, and you'll find that it easily blends the color. With this brush, I find that like if you press too hard, it just moves the paint around, and it makes it look like you can see too many of the brush strokes. But if you hold it very lightly to where the bristles are just barely hitting the canvas, it allows it to be smoother. And I'm just painting in like little circles. You can see the effect that it creates when you do it this way. And as I work my way down, I'm just grabbing more titanium white on the brush. I want my sky, so the sky is going to take up the entire shape of the canvas. We're going to paint all the canvas right now, and it's all blue, but I want this to get lighter and lighter as I work my way down. So I'm going to grab more white and work my way down with more white and blend that in with these swirly circular paint strokes. And it becomes very light towards the bottom. I'm going to grab a little bit more of the cerulean and just go up here and blend some of this up here. So now we have a very pretty, very simple blue background, and we're going to let this dry before going on to the next step. I recommend rinsing that blender brush in the sink instead of your water cup because it holds so much paint. So now my canvas is dry, and I'm going to start by drawing the composition of the painting. So we have a very large pumpkin, that steals most of the show in this painting. So in the lower right corner, I'm just going to draw a big circle that kind of represents the outer part of that pumpkin. So we'll just start with a simple arc shape. And then I like to break the pumpkin up into kind of these oval shapes. I'm going to start in the middle with the center bump part of the pumpkin. And to the right of that, I'm going to start at the top and draw down, top and draw down. On the left, same thing, top and draw down. And that's how you start to get those ridges on the pumpkin. The stem, instead of putting it at the very, very top of it, I'm going to start it below the very top of it and do this kind of scalloped bottom shape of the stem. And I want a really twisty, whimsical stem for this, so I'm going to just draw this double loop or single loop and then a spiral on the right. You're welcome to change the design of this stem. And because we started that stem below, we can still see 2 more pumpkin bumps behind that. So I did 2 more curved lines. And that forms our pumpkin shape. And then over to the left and behind the pumpkin, we have a gathered cornstalk. So we'll break this down shape by shape. It's just a simple triangle shape. So you can even make it a little bit wider at the top. And it goes behind your pumpkin. And then it's gathered over here at the top. And then we have these pieces fan out that way. So you don't have to do any more details to that, just requires basic shape. So it's kind of like we have a roadmap of what we're painting. And then we have our little bird. So I'm going to put my bird here. And we can break this down shape by shape. So we can start by doing a little semicircle shape. Circle, small circle on top of that for the head, a little line for the beak, tail, little lines going down for the feet, and then side feather kind of overlaps and curves at the top to give the bird a little bit more of an arched back instead of a straight back. So that's it for the drawing portion. We are going to paint the pumpkin first. And so for this one, I'm actually going to do a white layer on the pumpkin first. And I'm going to load my paint palette with some fresh titanium white paint and use this number 12 bright brush. Load that in the white. And I'm going to start in the middle for this center pumpkin bump. And so I like to outline it first and then take my paint strokes and drag downwards. So as you're filling each of these in, leave some of that background showing through. So outline it and drag your brush from top down, or you can do bottom to top, but you're doing this using the full width of the stroke, full width of the brush, and dragging it down and going in the direction. So you create that curve in the pumpkin by making your paint strokes go in that curved direction. So outline and drag in a curved direction. Leave space between each individual section. So that background color, that blue background, you can see a little bit of space or a little bit of that background showing through, creating a line between each of those pumpkin bumps. And then these 2 curved parts up here, it's okay if part of it paints over the stem. So this part needs to be in front, just brushing over, and this one I don't want to, I'm not going to continue to brush over all of this, and I still have background showing through, and that's kind of on purpose. This white layer is going to allow our pumpkin in our painting to show up nice and bright. So let's let that first layer dry, and so I'm going to rinse my brush off and I'm going to paint the first layer. There's a lot of layers in this painting, by the way. We're going to do the first layer for our cornstalk. Actually, no, we're going to do the stem next. The first layer for the stem is solid black, and this is Mars Black, and we'll be using the number 4 round brush. So I'm going to rinse this guy off and grab my number 4 round. Load your 4 round in the water and grab your black. Let the water on the brush kind of help loosen the paint a little bit, and roll your brush as you're loading it. This is going to allow you to paint thinner lines that are nice and smooth. And let's just paint out the shape of that pumpkin stem. So the bottom part we did a scallop shape, so I'm just outlining what I drew with the chalk, and you are welcome to change your chalk drawing. You don't have to go over what you drew. You can adjust it if needed. And that stem goes narrow and twists to the left. So everything right now is going to be painted solid black. Let's not worry about highlighting or anything like that until later. All of this gets painted in solid black. So it twists to the left, and then I'm just going to follow that loop. My twisty part right here ended up getting a little bit thicker than I wanted, but that's okay. I'm going to rinse off the number 4 round brush, and now we're going to do the first layer for the cornstalk, and we would need the color burnt sienna for this, so a dark brown color, and we'll be using the number 12 bright brush. So I'm not going to load my brush in a bunch of water for this one. I'm just going to grab the brown and start painting this in. So we want our paint strokes to go like this. I'm using the end of my bristles. So I'm holding the brush on the side like this. Right here, I know my cornstalk isn't going that direction, like the grains aren't, but I want to outline that curve of the pumpkin just so I can get around there and not have to paint over the pumpkin, because this is behind the pumpkin. So the rest, I want to use the end of my bristles. So they form this triangular shape, and we can have background colors showing through. This doesn't need to be solid. We want to start creating that texture without having to just paint it solid. So I can see some of that background showing through. And then, so this gathers right here, and then it frays outward. We can kind of make the top part a little bit flat, because there's going to be a little tie that's gathering everything together right there. Use the end of the bristles, and I'm going to start making this frayed at the top. So these are going this way. So kind of imagine a fan where the lines change directions. and they don't all have to be the same height. You can vary the height of it, so some might be smaller, some might be larger. And that is just the basic first layer of it, and we will be able to detail this all up later after this dark layer dries. I am going to do this, so this is kind of fun. I'm going to take some of these and have them bend downwards, so it's kind of the same line, except at the end of the line you're taking that paint stroke and doing an angle that curves or bends downwards. Next, I'm going to rinse the brush, and we're going to do the next layer for our pumpkin. We're going to start adding color onto it, and I'm going to use the color Naples, actually not Naples, Yellow Oxide. So Yellow Oxide is a dark kind of orangish yellow color. Load your number 12 bright brush into that color, and we're going to repeat what we did with the white. I'm going to start with the middle. You need to be really careful around the stem so you don't do what I did. I'm dragging black paint into this and I don't want that. But I'm going to do the center bump first. So we just outline that oval shape and just paint it in with paint strokes that curve and drag downwards. And then you need your burnt sienna. So when you're done painting your first oval, without rinsing the brush, grab a little bit of brown and drag that from the bottom part and up. That'll create a little bit of shadow on the bottom of your pumpkin. And also I kind of outlined the left side of that oval and a little bit on the right. And so then for our next section of the pumpkin, we don't need to rinse the brush unless there's too much brown. Then I would suggest rinsing and then starting over. But I'm going to take this yellow oxide color and do the same thing, and these paint strokes are curving outwards this way. I'm going to leave a little slither of space between this one and the one I just painted, so the paint color isn't overlapping. Actually, there's not a lot of space there that I left, but that's okay. Same thing with the brown. Grab your brown and drag that upwards from the bottom to create a little bit of shadowing on the bottom of the pumpkin. I'm going to wipe my brush off and do the next one. So just outline your shape and then fill your paint brush strokes in by stroking downwards and out to create that three-dimensional curve. I added a little bit of water to my brush there just because it's drying kind of fast, and I'm going to get some more yellow oxide loaded on my paint palette as well. Then grab the brown, drag and blend upwards in a curved direction. Wipe the brush and grab your yellow oxide and do your next one. So this one, I'm going to outline and I'm going to go all the way to the edge. It might end up overlapping a little bit over what we just did for the cornstalk. By not rinsing the brush in between, we get a few dark brown streaks in there, and I like how it creates variation in color for the pumpkin. And then this one on the right goes off the canvas. And then I'm going to go back and do the shadow for this one. So you blend it up and the shadow for this one. Then we have these two pieces in the back, so those ones I'm just going to do solid with the yellow oxide. I'm going to rinse the 12 bright brush and switch to the number 4 round brush and burnt sienna, and I am going to outline the lines that are in between each of the sections of the pumpkin. So load this with brown. I added a little bit of water in there because I know I'm going to be doing some thin lines, brushwork. Roll your brush when you load the brush. And then so these lines are just going to be outlined with the brown. So that creates a little bit of shadow that's in between each of those different segments of the pumpkin. And there's this line and this line. Without rinsing the brush, I'm going to grab more brown and I'm going to start adding my next layer to the stem. So earlier we painted the stem solid black. I'm going back over this with brown. The brown's not going to show up too bright right now, but this is going to just be our second layer, and I'm just going back over what I painted earlier. We will be adding some green onto this stem, but for now, let's just do the brown. And then I'm going to grab white and do my first little twist. So with that white, and before that brown dries, I'm just going to brush that in kind of a curved direction going that way. That's going to start that kind of twisty texture that we're trying to create. So that white blended with the brown on the canvas to create a lighter brown. And then I'm going to take this, so I still have white on my brush, and again I want to do this before it dries, and I'm going to take this and do another little twist that goes this way, but leave a little bit of a gap between what I just did, and that one is going to branch out like that, and another piece that kind of branches out that way. And then another little curve, leave a little gap between the other one. And then another little curve that goes this way. Maybe that one slightly branches out again. So the darker part of the stem, that base dark color, it acts as the shadow part, and the lighter color acts as the highlight. It creates that kind of twisty textured look. So if we want, we can go back in with a little bit more dark. That would be brown and black mixed together. You can kind of, I'm going to just kind of outline the bottom of this scalloped shape and maybe kind of go back in between some of the spirals to make sure that there's kind of division between those marks. But I'm going to leave that alone and then grab my green. I'm loading my paint palette with the color Ochre's Green Hue. And notice how I left that twisty part on the right of the stem black? It's because I'm going to do that part green. So I'm going to take my green and this, a little bit of white. So green with a little tad bit of white. I'm going to have this gradually transition to green. So I did a little green over the brown where it transitions, but the rest of this loopy spiral part of the stem is going to be green with a little bit of white. I'm using that white to kind of highlight that as I go, so it kind of changes color from dark to light and then light to dark. Let that blend on the canvas, and so now we have a green part of the stem. And if you want, you can add pumpkin leaves to this, but I decided to leave the pumpkin leaves out of this because I'm going to do fall leaves in the background. We are going to add the next layer to our cornstalk next. So pumpkin's going to be drying while we're doing this. We're kind of going back and forth and adding our layers to different parts. So this is the color Naples Yellow, which is a kind of a light cream yellow color. And I need my number 4 round brush. So let's take this light cream yellow color, the Naples Yellow, and let's add some burnt sienna into it. So it's going to make this relatively darker So equal parts Naples Yellow and brown mixed together. And we're going to paint a few cornstalk pieces, but these are going to be more distinct. So I'm going to take this first one and do a line, but kind of wiggle that line a little bit, have it bend downwards, and make this like triangular piece that bends downwards. And I'm going to do several of those. And again, these are fanning out in different directions. Some of them don't have to bend down, they can just be kind of thick and pointed at the top. So to do that, you kind of press down on your brush to create the thicker stroke. And if you want, you can create a variety of different darkness levels of your pieces. So I added a little bit more brown into this one. You just don't want it to go too light right now because the lighter parts are going to be after this layer dries. So you want to keep it a medium yellow color or medium yellow brown color. If you need to overlap your bird, that's fine, don't worry about it. So maybe this piece kind of curls upwards. I'm going to paint some corn tassels in this as well, so use the same color. And you might need to thin it down a little bit or roll your brush because these are going to be thin lines at first. So we're going to do a thin line and then we're going to do little pollen pieces for the corn tassels. So this is a line. And then I did another line that branches out, and then these little marks are the little pollen pieces. So this one just happens to have two. So you do a line and then you make little tiny marks on each side for the little pollen pieces. So that's how we can create the corn tassels. And so we can do several of these going in different directions. So there's another one that's going this way. And again, you can change. So I'm adding a little bit more brown in this one and the tassels in particular because I'm going to highlight these up. So the first layer is going to be dark and they're going to have brighter highlights after they dry. And if you want to paint more tassels, you're welcome to. I'm going to take this color that I've been working with, this kind of dark yellow color, and just kind of lightly add this in here, mostly towards the top, but I can take it all the way down. It's just I want my bottom part to be more shadowy, and it needs to be more shadowy right next to the pumpkin. But just kind of use that color to highlight this, and it's starting to give it that kind of golden brown color. And then I'm going to take my Naples, just the Naples Yellow, and paint a little curve. So that's going to be the tie at the top where it's gathering the corn stalks all together. And then without rinsing, unless your brush is super overloaded, you can rinse. I want to take my black and kind of lightly brush down here and around, a little bit around the pumpkin, and it's creating some shadow behind the pumpkin and on the bottom of the corn stalk. So very lightly, you don't want it to go too dark, but you're also creating that texture by doing those paint strokes that are kind of going at an angle to create that grain texture. I'm going to add orange to my pumpkin, and if you like the way it is and you don't want to add more layers, you want to leave it alone and keep it simple, you're welcome to do that. But I am going to do another layer, and this is going to add more orange to it, give it more of an orange color actually. So I'm going to take Cad Yellow Medium and Cad Orange Hue and mix those two colors together. So it's kind of more of a yellow orange. And I'm going to start at the top, and I'm basically doing the same technique I did earlier with that yellow oxide color. But this is a layer, and I don't want to cover up the layers below it. So as I'm brushing this on, I'm doing this very lightly so as to allow a lot of that yellow oxide color to still be showing through. I don't want to overpower it. So I'm only doing this on the top and I'm brushing it down. This really adds a lot of color and depth to our pumpkin. It's really important if you're using orange, so this is like a see-through translucent kind of orange. If you're using craft paints, you might struggle with this because a lot of craft paints are very opaque, so you don't get to see that layer underneath. You can still do a similar thing, you just may not get the same effect from that. I'm doing a little bit of orange up here. I'm going to start highlighting the pumpkin. So before this dries, I'm going to grab white and mix that on my palette. So I had a little orange on my brush and I mix that with white. So we don't want pure white, we just want white mixed with orange. And this might be a little bit too bright for what I wanted to achieve. So on the far left part, I added this lighter color, and this is highlighting the pumpkin. So it's blending with that orange that we just layered on. Loading my brush in just little bits of white. If it helps, you can pre-mix your colors, so you can mix white and orange together so it's a lighter orange. You just don't want it to be too bright white. I'm going to take some of my orange and yellow and go back over this one that got too bright. And then I'm going to take a little bit of brown and actually brush a little bit of this brown at the bottom. We did this earlier, but I'm just adding a bit more of shadow. That looks nice and pretty, and now I'm going to work on my cornstalk next layer, and we're going to go back to let's use the 4 round brush again. So switch back to this brush, and I'm going to make a lighter color to layer on my next color on the cornstalk, and this is going to be lighter. I'm going to take my Cad Yellow medium and my Naples Yellow and a little bit of white, about equal parts of each of those. So yellow, cream yellow, and white. And I'm going to add more of these corn leaves, stems. So I created one that kind of branches out. So these just kind of go up and bend down. We're trying to mimic dried corn stems, corn leaves. And we don't want to cover up all of our dark. This is just our lighter layer. So I'm painting them in areas where I haven't painted other leaf pieces. So maybe this one kind of goes out this way and branches. And then maybe there's one more right there. I can take this color and add more texture up here. So I'm taking this and just kind of dragging it down to create those textured paint strokes, but I don't want to cover all of that first layer. I'm going to grab some white and really highlight this here. But leave the bottom part dark, and right behind the pumpkin, that part stays a little bit shadowy too. I'm going back over the little tassel pieces with this same color, and that's going to highlight those. I'm not covering all of the dark, I'm just going over it with like a smaller mark so that dark part still shows around it. I'm going to go back over some of those medium brown colored pieces and just kind of loosely brush to highlight them, but not cover all of it. And you are allowed to make this look messy and uneven. It's a cornstalk, so it's supposed to look messy. And then I'm going to take my dark brown and go back over on the left part of this side. And I want to create some texture that's kind of fraying outwards. So I'm taking that burnt sienna and I'm dragging this to go. So instead of going up at an angle like it has been, little pieces are just kind of sticking out on the side and angling down. I'm going to take this to the next level here with titanium white, and this is really going to brighten up a lot of parts of the painting. And you only want just a little bit of white on the end of your bristles, and you're just doing this along the edges of some of these lighter pieces, and that'll really brighten up parts of the cornstalk. I can add a layer of white on top of the pollen pieces on the tassels. Again, only little tiny bits of white is really necessary for this because it does make everything super bright. You don't want to go too crazy with it. I'm going to do a little bit of texture on this tie, so these little kind of like curved lines or curved paint strokes, and then I want to go back with dark and go back over that so that's not that bright. So I did white and then I went back with brown and yellow, and then I'm going to kind of lighten this up with a little bit of white without rinsing the brush. So whatever other colors were on there, that's fine. And then maybe just a few more brighter pieces in there. I'm going to do some highlighting on the pumpkin stem too, after I just add a few more lighter brush pieces in there with the white. So still using the number 4 round brush and titanium white. I'm actually going to rinse so that I can start fresh here. So a little bit of titanium white on the end of my bristles. So on the edges of these swirls, I'm just lightly adding white just on the edges of it. Again, you don't want to do too much. You don't want to overpower it, so that'll highlight your little swirl texture piece. I can add a little bit onto the green piece and just leave it like that. So next, we're going to paint the bird, and you want to make sure all the cornstalk is dry because the bird is going to be overlapping part of the cornstalk. And for the most part, we still have our drawing still visible, but if you want to get a piece of chalk to kind of update the drawing, you can. And the first thing I'm going to do is paint the bird white. So just like how we drew it, we can start shape by shape using the 4 round brush. And I just did the half circle shape, and then I'm going to go down and do the tail, little kind of triangular piece that's kind of hanging down. So everything is solid white right now. This is going to help us get the bird to overlap the dark colors from the cornstalk. And then his wing goes a little bit above that half circle and curves at the top, but then it kind of sticks out in the back. And then I'm going to paint the circle for the head. And then little beak that's sticking out. So a little triangle right in the middle of that circle. I'm going to rinse the brush and then grab Mars Black to do the little feet of the bird next. So I'm going to roll my brush because I'm going to do these thin lines, and if you need to water it down slightly, you can. So these are going down at an angle and very, very simple little feet on top of the pumpkin. While this first layer of the bird is drying, I'm going to do falling leaves in the background. And these are just going to be simple abstract leaves. It's almost going to look like confetti flying in the air. But I'm going to do this with my 12 bright brush. And I'm going to mix orange and yellow together. So these little paint strokes are just kind of pressing hard on the bristles and making a little kind of abstract mark in the sky. And you can do some whiter pieces or some thinner pieces. You can have fun and mix colors together. So you can take titanium white, and it's just one little paint stroke to create that effect. So I kind of made a little row going of the leaves, and you can pretty much do it everywhere if you want. But they're mostly coming from above the cornstalk and just kind of flying diagonally down to the right. And then when our bird is dry, we can do the detail work on it. So I'm going to rinse the 12 bright brush and get my number 4 round brush. And I'm going to start with Mars Black. So I'm going to do, so our bird has we're going to do like a chickadee style. So it has a black sort of cap on the top of his head. So I'm just going to kind of outline where I want that to be. So it's almost like a little comma shape, and then fill it in solid black. Then I'm going to take this black and extend it on the back of his wing, like so, and just kind of outline where his wing is, and then fill his back tail feathers in with black. Then under, or on the bottom part of his head, we have another little black area, like a little moon shape. So this is under the beak. And I'm going to get some fresh white on my palette. So I'm going to have black and white on my brush and mix a gray. So equal parts black and white together, and paint the beak with that color. Grab a little bit more white. So this is black and white with a little bit extra white. So it's kind of a lighter gray. I'm going to do these sort of feather strokes. So I'm kind of seesawing my brush in a curved direction to create these little feathered strokes. And my colors are kind of varied because I have color on my brush that's not even mixed all the way. Then a little bit of that gray on the chest of the bird, just under that black marking. And next I'm rinsing my brush, and I'm going to add a little bit of golden color. So I'm going to take my Cad Yellow and my white. You could also just use Naples Yellow for this, but I just mixed the Cad Yellow medium with titanium white. And I'm gently kind of brushing this almost dry brush style, so not a lot of paint, just to give it a little bit of a yellow tint over the white part that we painted earlier. And then I'm going to rinse and grab some fresh titanium white, a little bit of white on the brush, and then I want to extend this part right here. So where that black piece is, kind of extending this down, and it is turning gray because that color from the black isn't dry all the way, but that's what I want. I wanted it to be more of a light gray color. And then I grabbed more black. So this part right here, I'm repainting that part black. And then I'm going to take the black and do an outline under the wing and a few more kind of black feathers and a little bit more on his tail. So if you need to create a little bit of contrast, since my cornstalk is dark, I added a little bit more white to his tail just to kind of get that to stand out a little bit better. And now I'm grabbing black and I'm just going to do some thicker little curved marks on the bottom of his side wing. Rinse the brush and then go back to titanium white. So I'm going to do the rest of his side cheek over here. So with titanium white, there's already a white layer there, but I'm going to do kind of these thicker paint strokes and drag some of that gray into it. And then take titanium white and do a little dot for the eye, and the eye is in the black cap area on his head. Rinse the brush and grab a little tiny black dot and do a little tiny black dot on the middle part of his eye. You can also do that with a toothpick. Your bird might need a little bit of outline work if it needs help standing out against the cornstalk because it's similar colors with the gray. So I'm going to take black and actually outline the bottom part of his wing here. And then add some darker lines to the tail and the bottom of his body. You can even outline the top part of the wing too if you think that'll help. There's a little black line that was added in the middle of his beak, and then I just added a little white mark to highlight on the top of the beak. And that is the conclusion of our cornstalk harvest painting. I painted the sides of this canvas black and signed my name in the lower right. Thanks for watching, and thanks for painting with me.